With less than a month before elections, the ANC is not only focused on trying to remain in power, but has had to also turn its attention to putting out fires that may threaten its campaign. The party has had to condemn the actions of some of its regional leaders who recently disrupted a book event, as well as ANC Youth League leaders in the Free State who threatened to burn the book Gangsta State, Ace Magashule's Web of Corruption. Add to this the outcry on the party's electoral lists due to some of its senior leaders being implicated in corruption. Outside of criticizing the party on its parliamentary and provincial election lists, what have the party's veterans done to help the organization renew itself ahead of the May 8th elections? And why do they still want you to vote for the party? And joining me in the studio to discuss the state of the ANC and its future is stalwart Murphy Morobe. And Tate Morobe, pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
On the show.
Yeah.
It's a plethora of problems, isn't it? I may have left a few out. You wanted to add some?
No, it's a long list. But I think my sense is that from our perspective as veterans and stalwarts, we have been on this path way back when we began to engage with the issue of the former president. Because we remain convinced that the ANC is still, in fact, the key party that should lead society in the direction to which the promises of the Constitution were based on. And we strongly believe that it can be recaptured, can be brought back to the people, but we understood that it's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's not just going to come back on the basis of prayer, because you're dealing with elements who want to move it in one direction,
Sure.
And our task is to bring it back to its original intent.
I'm impressed, or rather interested in your comment when you say it must be recaptured, which implies actually the ANC is captured as we speak, right? And you also mentioned something about the party being the leader of society.
Yeah.
Now, with all the things that are going on within the society, is it leading it in the right direction? That's question one. And number two, how captured is the ANC?
Well, I think all the various revelations that have come up in the recent past have indicated that there are elements who have insinuated themselves into the fabric of the ANC and located themselves in a way that they began to undermine the core values and core basis of the ANC. Now, it's difficult, especially for some of us who've been in this organization from childhood, in fact, to see how these things have panned out. But we still believe that it's a battle worth fighting in terms of our own asset base. The ANC is a repository of the emotions, is a repository of the essence of what it became of us as black South African, as non-racialists fighting the battle to establish a non-racial constitution.
Now, ordinary citizens look at the ANC that has the track record, it's been in existence for this long, a proud history, and they watch it come apart, being captured. And they can see, they don't really need to be told by the media or anybody else that there's a problem here with the ANC. But why should they regard it as leader of society if it's conducting itself in the manner that even you, as a stalwart veteran member of the organization, are concerned about?
No, there is no doubt about the fact that that kind of status that it enjoyed has been significantly weakened. But nevertheless, in fact, because of the capital of history and the values that we know are there, it actually can be resuscitated again. Now, the fact of the matter is that we're in the period where an election is due, and in an election, parties put forward their positions in terms of what they have to do or what they're going to do for society. And clearly, in terms of the configuration, the ANC still is is the major party in South Africa. Of course, there are contestants, the DA and others, but primarily we still have those basic configurations. So for us, for South Africa, and I believe it is important to ensure that the ANC is fixed for the sake of South Africa.
Now, the revelations that are coming out of particularly the State Capture Commission, invariably about the ANC to a large extent. I mean, it's ANC leaders and members who are implicated there. To you, what has been the most embarrassing revelation to come out of that?
Well, there is no one that is worse than the other. In fact, the revelations in and of themselves suggest the extent to which the problem has actually rooted itself. Now, fortunately, We have institutions that are there to begin to help us to unravel this. And that is the beauty of South Africa, that we have those institutions. These things are not been hidden. Of course, the culprits will seek to hide. But with the commissions that have been put in place, one hopes that they'll run to the full extent of getting those, in fact, who are guilty of any offense to appear before courts.
The opposition parties in Parliament moved 8 motions of no confidence in Parliament, saying the concerns that are now coming out, expressing the concerns that are now coming out at the State Commission. And the ANC opposed it, opposed all of them until, last year or 2 years ago. So what should people think about that and the renewal of the ANC?
Well, those are difficult things, because I think in the nature of politics and the way in which people take positions, Parliament actually prevent a platform where those engagement takes place. And naturally, the people within the ANC will try to defend themselves, even at some times, in fact, to the point of ridiculousness from some of the things we've observed about the previous issues of the Guptas and so on. So,
which leads me to the question then of the lists, right? And the people who've been mentioned at the Commission and elsewhere, including in Parliament itself and in the media space, that these are the people who are implicated. And guess what? The ANC, in its wisdom, says, okay, we're sending them back to Parliament, these people. And then there's a public outcry. And then the organization defends the list as is. And the message currently is very, very confusing to the public. What is the view of the veterans on this matter?
The veterans have been very clear from the initial stages when we set ourselves up. Even with the recent statement that we issued on the question of the list, it's clearly the position is those people who are implicated, and people are implicated to varying degrees, and we know it's going to be difficult for any party to say we're going to take out 37 people from our list. But to the extent that there are those who are so implicated, obviously. Take, for example, the case of one of those who the Constitutional Court made some very clear and definite findings, notwithstanding the fact that the conference elected the people. Clearly, a leadership should be able to say, hey, it's not correct for you to be on this list because, you're opening the party up to attacks from all kinds of directions. But it hasn't happened. That's why, in fact, we now come up again to call on the ANC to ensure that those names are processed in a way that the Integrity Committee can take a view to help the leadership to actually move them. Yes. At best, we'd hope that their consciences will arouse them to take the decision to step down to save the party.
And I was just to ask you this question, that being a leader and having been a leader yourself, you understand that, sometimes you look at yourself, your conscience and your ethical conduct, and if it's questionable, that it makes sense on your own volition to step aside, isn't it? But why are people insistent that they should go to Parliament?
Well, I suppose it's all comes down to vested interests, and people are holding because whether it is the pay or whether they don't want to be out of jobs or whether they feel they're unemployable anywhere else outside of the party, those are the things that are at play here. But the party has to be quite stringent about those decisions. And to that extent, in fact, that is the challenge of the current leadership, because the leadership coming out of the conference in Nasrec, it was a compromise result. So clearly, from where I sit, you can have a sense of some of those compromises playing themselves out, even at that level. And those weakened, in fact, the ability of the party to take very direct and determined decisions to move forward.
And of course, they send a signal to the public that the party is struggling to correct it.
Absolutely, because then they start to lose the confidence of the people, because there's nothing as important as a leadership that can take the decisions, and especially unpleasant decisions that are uncomfortable, mainly because they'll be the correct.
And there's something that happened recently which actually shocked people. They're not shocked, but took them back and said, not at this stage of the campaigning can any party really score such a serious own goal. Members of the ANC disrupting a book launch, and a book launch that's detailing serious allegations against one of the most senior members or senior leaders of the organization. And the organization seems to be confused, does not know how to respond to all these developments.
In my book, that's absolute sacrilege to ban a book. It's absolute madness. In fact, it tells you that those people have absolutely no understanding of the history of the ANC, because the book and reading and study has been so central to the ANC from the beginning of the founders, or Josiah Dube, or Pixley Gaseme. In fact, they prided themselves in seeking deeper knowledge, and that is about reading and it's about books. And therefore, to have a situation like this, where people ban books simply because they are unhappy with the content of the books and they have no temerity to write their own story that contests it, because that's the way to do it. So we, from the veterans' point of view, we find that as completely unacceptable behavior.
And what about the allegations in the book itself? They're very serious, aren't they? And very embarrassing for that matter.
I mean, if I was the Secretary General of the ANC, obviously he's going to be contesting that. If I was him, I would be approaching the President to basically say, you know, there are serious allegations. They're going to distract me from doing my job of running the organization properly. Please help me in terms of let me recuse myself until such time these things are resolved. I mean, he's not been charged. He's not been called to a commission, you know, to say anything. And so those allegations in the book. So, but that notwithstanding being allegations, I think there are certain standards to which politicians have to be held, especially when they hold public office. It's not even about being found guilty, because we know people who do wrong things will do everything to camouflage, to make it difficult for them to be found guilty. But at an ethical level, we can take judgments that say people in these situations must stand aside so that the party can be allowed to find people who will provide a picture of a party that is serious about values and morals.
Let's talk to Tiani, who's joining us from the Free State. Tiani? Tiani, I beg your pardon. Welcome. Tiani. Okay, all right. It sounds like we lost Tiani, but let's look at the situation in Alex. It appears that it is the ANC members or representatives on the ground who instigated the Alex shutdown, which now seems to be backfiring because there are uprising service delivery protests all over the place now, which are putting a strain on the police and probably distorting the campaign message of the ANC.
Yeah, look, I don't know about the affiliations of whoever's involved, but my point about that is that protests and marches around the kinds of issues that people are raising, Alex, are justifiable because the material conditions on the ground are such that people cannot sit down and wait for Father Christmas.
Yes.
Their experience has been that whenever issues have been raised, the politicians have either dragged their feet and have not really fully addressed them. Now, in fact, when you look at all of the protests, what is quite central to them, in all of them, is that those are issues that subsist at a local government level. They are about basic services, water, electricity, sanitation, you name it. And those are all things that the municipalities have to deal with.
Well, very briefly, tell me, what do you regard as ANC's successes and also failures over the past 25 years? I've got a sense, I mean, on the economic front, for instance, high unemployment rate, one would have thought that would be one of the major issues to be tackled.
I mean, if you think about successes, the successes also have been part of the generation of more difficulties. If you look at migration, though on the one hand it's about the state of the economy, which is a function of either bad policies or mixing with global situations. So for the ANC, I would say, I think those have been stated in different write-ups, even at ANC conferences, where they deal about RDP housing, whatever the issues about quality, etc., but to the extent to which people in different communities have had title deeds, etc. So it's varied, but it's actually overtaken more by the negativity that is there, especially where it deals with issues like places like Alex, where government has not really been able to crack the housing crisis. At least to have a clear plan that actually say how that plan links up to migration and the management of that as people come into the urban areas. Many of the people who come from the urban areas come from the rural areas. And many of them have been kicked out of farms by white farmers, so they find places in these small towns that have got shacks developing everywhere. So it's not a sustainable situation, and the resources are not quite commensurate with the demand that is being generated by all these developments.
And of course the negativity persists, and the ANC is going to have its hands full before.
There will be, and elections provide people with an opportunity to have tactical positions in prevailing on their positions.
Mefri Morobe, good luck as you help to recapture the ANC.
Well, I'll find another way, maybe recapture.
Well, good luck to you, though.
Thank you.
All right, Robert McBride has used the Zondo Commission to shed light on the tense relationship between crime intelligence and the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, and we'll discuss his testimony in a short while.